After the end of World War II, it turned out that many of the treasures looted by the Nazis disappeared without a trace. We are talking about treasures worth tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, and in many cases it has not been possible to find out where the looted valuables disappeared to. Let us dwell on the most famous such cases of disappearance of treasures. From the beginning of World War II, the Nazis took all the gold from the national treasuries of the conquered countries. Later, the treasury of the Third Reich began to replenish the personal property of the citizens of the occupied territories. Imagine that at Auschwitz alone up to 11 kilograms of gold were melted down from prisoners' dental crowns, jewelry, and watches per day. Counting only such gold reserves of the Nazis, without taking into account other values, went to hundreds of tons, but already by 1943, Martin Bormann began to prepare such emergency airfields in case of loss in the war. If we consider that during the Second World War the gold stock of Argentina increased from 346 tons of gold to almost 1,200, and Brazil from 50 to 346 tons, then it is easy to understand where the Nazis exported huge stocks of valuables. Bormann personally controlled more than 100 hiding places in the Third Reich. One of these hiding places was Neuschwanstein Castle in the Bavarian Alps. The Nazis stored and hid in the castle the valuables they had taken out of France and stored a strategic stock of gold there, which is now worth billions of dollars. At the end of the war, the SS were going to blow up the castle with all the valuables, but the Allies succeeded in foiling the plan. But while virtually all the looted art remained in the castle, by the way, it took them 6 weeks to get out. The gold disappeared without a trace. As it turned out, the gold reserve was removed from the castle at the end of April 1945, literally a couple of weeks before the war ended. It is clear that it was physically impossible for the Nazis to take such amounts of gold abroad. At the time, it is possible that the Nazis had hidden the gold in a more secret hiding place in the vicinity of the castle. But in the history of World War II, there have been far more mysterious cases of the disappearance of untold treasures. One such treasure was the gold of Breslau. The gold of Breslau is referred to as the valuables of several generations of the population of Lower Silesia, as well as some of the looted treasures of other occupied lands, which had been collected for storage in the bunkers of the city of Breslau, the current Polish city of Wrocław. The amazing thing is that after the war there were no serious witnesses left who could say unequivocally what happened to the gold. At the end of the war, in 44th year, the Germans obviously thought about the fate of this treasure. The treasure had to be hidden from the Allied forces at all costs, and this is what I was able to find out from the testimony of a number of witnesses. It is known that the local authorities had set up several large military factories on the territory of Lower Silesia, about which the darkest rumors are still circulating. One of these enterprises was located in the town of Pichowice. During the war, a large military factory operated in Pichowice with a special railroad branch line to it, and most interestingly, some of the production facilities were located under the ground. There are many old mine workings. Old tunnels under the local mountain sobeys were expanded, concreted, and prepared to receive valuable goods. Among other things, a scheme of tunnel mines was worked out, and on November 7, 1944, a train filled to the brim with treasures, ingots of gold, precious works of art arrived at the territory of the factory in Pichowice. Within 24 hours, a large group of concentration camp prisoners had paved 400 meters of railroad track deep into the mountain. The train slowly entered the wide tunnel and disappeared from view. Immediately afterwards, the temporary rails were dismantled, the entrance to the tunnel was blown up, and all traces of the tunnel were covered up. In the end, all the prisoners working on the construction and dismantling of the access road were shot. In the course of the research, experts came to a number of general conclusions. Under the mountain sobes apparently really is an underground object, probably of industrial character. There are still well-preserved traces of the drainage system built once. This system could belong to some kind of complex, which does not have the outside of the mountain, and therefore it must be inside. In the 98th year, the expedition working on Mount Sobes explored its subsoil with GPR and other high-tech devices. The final stage was drilling. During the drilling, in places where, according to witnesses and the results of instrumental research, could be backfilled entrances, the drill, in addition to the rocky soil, raised concrete, and at one point the drill encountered such resistance that the ground on which people were standing began to shake. In the end, the expedition managed to confirm the existence of a certain underground complex under the mountain, but the main problem was to find the entrance to the mine, which had been blocked by the explosion. Groups of searchers repeatedly combed through this area, but to no avail. And now, relatively recently, a group of enthusiasts made a statement that they had found the entrance to the mine and the solution to the mystery of Breslau gold only a matter of time. Well, only lately this theme for some reason has not received continuation from enthusiasts. There are no more statements and it is still unclear what is going on. Well, let's wait. The name of the Japanese General Tomoyuki Yamashita has been firmly associated with the mysterious treasures since World War II. At the end of the war, Yamashita was commander of the imperial forces in the Philippines and, in particular, was in charge of transferring valuables from the Philippines to Japan. At the end of the war, Yamashita was commander of the imperial forces in the Philippines and in particular was in charge of ferrying valuables from the Philippines to Japan. So at the end of the war, the Americans, supported by local guerrillas, suddenly landed in the Philippines and moved swiftly toward Fort Santiago. It was no longer possible to evaluate the treasures. Yamashita ordered that the looted treasures be hidden in the captured territories, with an independent estimate of up to $100 billion. And the treasures were hidden in 170 different locations. Only a problem arose. Not a single enthusiast has yet been able to officially discover any of these treasures. There are several versions of what happened to the treasure. Firstly, an attempt may have been made to take the treasure to Japan, and at some point, the ship sank during the bombing raids. Second, some skeptics believe that most of the treasure was discovered by the U.S. military and smuggled abroad. But third, the widow of the former Philippine president, Imelda Marcos, made a sensational confession. Allegedly, her husband, during his reign, managed to find a considerable part of the treasures and smuggled them abroad, where he really had an account for several $billion. Except that the current Philippine authorities have long accused the former president of massive government embezzlement and believe that the widow is simply trying to whitewash her husband's name. In any case, the mystery of General Yamashita's treasure is still unsolved. The next legendary treasure is called Rommel's gold. In the first months of 43, the German and Italian divisions in North Africa were forced to retreat to Tunisia under Allied attack and General Rommel was rushed there. 2 months later, on May 13, 43, the African Corps of 200,000 men was completely surrounded and surrendered to General Montgomery's forces. It was then that the legend of Rommel's gold was born. It is about several boxes full of gold bars stored in the African Corps. There are several versions of this legend. The first version claims that the Germans tried to evaluate the looted treasure from Africa under Allied pressure, but they failed and the treasure was buried somewhere in the Tunisian desert by a group of German soldiers and is still there today. According to another, more popular version, the Rommel treasure was taken out of Africa on the eve of the total defeat of the African Corps, but the ship carrying the metal boxes of gold was sunk by British aircraft. The most popular version is that the SS transported the boxes to an underwater cave off the east coast of Corsica. The main and perhaps only source of information about the secret of Rommel's gold was Peter Flagg, a former paratrooper who said that he was a diver at the Corsican military base at the time. Leake claimed that as a diver he had been instructed to hide several sealed boxes in one of the underwater caves. However, the former diver seems to have been very intrigued by this story because in 48, he, released from a prisoner of war camp shortly before, showed up unexpectedly in Corsica and, with the cooperation of the French authorities, tried for a long time to find the treasure. He was accused of fraud and imprisoned for 2 months. Only after his release from prison, the only witness disappeared without a trace. According to the most popular version, upon his release from prison, Flagg was allegedly kidnapped by the Italian mafia, who tried to beat information about the treasure out of him. Numerous attempts to find Rommel's gold have so far come to nothing. Apparently, over the decades, the sea has worked hard to hide the steel treasure boxes. The Third Reich was not only interested in gold and jewelry, but also in works of art. The Nazis deliberately looted art galleries and museums and private collections in the occupied countries and transported the looted valuables to Germany. And perhaps the most famous work of art that could not be found to this day was the Amber Room. On September 17, 1941, German troops entered the town of Pushkin. The Catherine Palace, where the Amber Room had been kept, was destroyed and looted. The Amber Room itself was of particular interest for the Third Reich. The room was dismantled, packed up and sent on 27 trucks to the station Severnaya. There it was stored until the Soviet army invaded eastern Prussia in 1944. But after the Soviet army stormed Königsberg in April of 1945, the Amber Room disappeared without a trace, and its fate is still a mystery. According to one version, it could have burned up during the bombing. According to another, it is still hidden somewhere in the Kaliningrad region. According to the third, the room together with the gold of the Third Reich was shipped to South America, and so on. The research and versions are so numerous that it is worth making a separate video on this topic. In 2003, in honor of the 300th anniversary of St. Petersburg, an updated copy of the Amber Room took its place in Tsarskoye Selo, but the mystery of the original Amber Room remains unsolved. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and write what you think about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support is very important to me.